Hello there. Hello, everybody. This is Forrest Lightberg with the Consciousness Network in Santa Barbara. Welcome to this special webinar on money, mindfulness, and financial resilience during COVID-19 with Irene Kelly, who's a brilliant financial advisor we're gonna talk about a lot of interesting things today, and we're gonna outline exactly what we're gonna cover. But really, I wanted to put this together because in the craziness of the current time, this is an area that people are being affected in so intensely and suddenly. So I just felt it was appropriate to put something together where, even though the time is so uncertain right now in the external financial landscape, that there are still things, principles, there are still practices, principles, and knowledge that we can learn and implement to help ourselves navigate with greater resiliency financially during this time. So I do want to introduce Irene. Irene grew up in Mexico City, has always had an interest in people and economics. And as the daughter of an entrepreneur, she learned the value of discipline and purpose in our finances. She's been drawn to the sectors of impact investing and economic development at CHOICE Humanitarian, which is a nonprofit working to alleviate extreme poverty. There, she developed a financial literacy program that ultimately nurtured her passion and interest for financial education. She currently lives in Santa Barbara, where she works in financial services and serves on the board of the Santa Barbara Public Library Foundation and the Santa Barbara Response Network. She's also a 200-hour certified yoga instructor, a mindfulness and health, the founder of Spread the Love, Inc., which is a mindfulness and health education platform for Spanish speakers, where she teaches yoga and financial health. And she also hosts a podcast meant to educate and raise awareness on ways to break cycles that lead to domestic violence. So she's all around Renaissance woman, and I want to bring her to the table right now. Hi, Irene, welcome.
Thank you so much, Forrest. It's such a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Sure thing. So just my first question for you here is, what's your overall intention for the audience today? What would you like them to walk away with from this? What are we going to explore today?
Well, my biggest intention is to help people with real tools and just pieces of advice that we use when we work with clients in financial advising. Some pieces that can help us improve our relationship with money. How can we bring more clarity to our relationship with money? And I think most importantly, I want to explore today the topic of our financial mindset. Sometimes our money mindset is something that we don't tend to put a lot of attention to, but in times like this, it's so important to focus on our mindset, because it seems that there's a lot of things that are not under our control, right? There's so much uncertainty. And when we talk about finances, at the end of the day, there's a lot that it's under our control, even if it doesn't feel like that right now. So the biggest intention is also to remind people, what can you control? And let's focus on that. And let's take this time to take a deeper look at our relationship with our money so that we can improve that and we can learn from where we are today and prepare for the future.
Yeah, in an interesting kind of way, in an ironic way, I would think that the current COVID crisis is a good impetus for people to start to take a closer look at their relationship with money. They're almost forced to, in a way.
Yeah, pretty much.
If they wanna navigate with more peace of mind and more stability, they're almost forced to do that. So the first question I have for you is, what exactly is money and mindfulness?
So when we think about, let's just focusing on the concept of mindfulness. Being mindful is being completely present. And when we're completely present, we're in this state of acceptance of what is. We're not judging where we are. We're not judging what is. We're just present. And that opens the door for us to be objective. And when we incorporate money, really being mindful with our finances or being mindful with our money, it's coming to a place where we're not like our thoughts are not navigating back and forth between the past, what we could have done differently, or the future. What am I going to do? Am I going to be okay? What's going to happen? mindfulness and money, it's really coming back to a place where we're completely present. We are accepting where we are with our money with no judgment, and we come to a place where we're at peace with the understanding that there's a lot that we can do to change our financial situation. If there are things that we don't like, the more mindful we are, the less emotional pressure we're going to be feeling when it comes to making financial decisions. So that concept of mindfulness, how can we come to peace with where we are financially? Judgment aside, bringing some compassion to the equation, because we're going through difficult times and there's a lot of uncertainty, but we know that that's not going anywhere. So that is, right? How can we be present with that? How can we really be at peace with the fact that that's the reality we live in? Now, what's the next step, right? The more we are at peace with, okay, this is it, this is where we are, the more objective we're going to be able to be when it comes to our money and when it comes to taking financial decisions.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like in this time, a lot of people would be just driving themselves crazy if they were critical of themselves in
Mm-hmm.
such a turbulent time, that the intention to move forward with a greater acceptance seems to be a really sane approach, and something that can save people a lot of headache and stress. So regarding the effects of our thoughts about money, what would you say about how we can how are you seeing the current COVID crisis affect people's relationship with money, the way they think about money, the way what they believe, how they feel about it, and how can they work with that in a positive way to empower themselves?
I love that question, because when we go back to the relationship between our finances and our health, worrying about our money, just having these constant thoughts about, oh, what am I going to do, and that anxiety, that has a direct relation with our health, because those thoughts can increase our blood pressure even. Like there has been studies showing that. So the point we want to get here is there's a very big difference between spending time worrying about our finances and spending time taking action over our financial worries. So that headspace, that mindset, it's going to be essential as we move forward. What we're seeing a lot in these times is there's people that had the fortune of being prepared for something like this. They had set aside money for emergencies like what we're going through. But we also see that there's people that unfortunately they were not in that position. So here, this is a very, very important time, because we can come to terms with what we have done to come to this place, financially speaking. So one of the things that I'm suggesting people to do is, every time you catch yourself worrying about finances, right? What exactly? It's important to understand that worry. Where is that worry coming from? Because some of those worries come from a place of fear. And some of those worries really come from, if we have that fear, we have to deal with it. We have to first name it to tame it, right? That's the first piece. Being vocal about those thoughts, being vocal about what we're worried about during these times. Because once you are vocal about it, once you really name these issues, that's the first step towards addressing them, number one, and number two, taking action. So this is a time to go back to the principles of finance. And this is when the word budget is going to come to the equation. I know that a lot of people, when I say budget, they kind of cringe a little bit. And that just shows how it's time to make a change. It's time to make a change with our relationship with money, because when we hear the word budget, why do we sometimes get this negative feeling? Why do we feel like, oh, something must be wrong if I need to budget? No, a budget is basically a plan, right? It's like when we're going to go on a trip. If you're going to go on a trip, you know where you're going. You know how much gas you have for the trip. You know that you check your car, you make sure everything is okay. Something similar happens with our finances. The more specific we are with What is it that we want? What are our priorities? If maybe our priorities right now are spending less, trying to save a little more, then that's what we're going to focus on. And then all of our attention should go to what steps can I take to deal with that pain point, to deal with those concerns, instead of sitting worrying about it and not taking action. That can be very damaging, not only to our health, which is the most important thing for everyone right now. We have to take care of our health. So really pay attention to those thoughts and turn them into actions. That's going to be just very, very, very important.
So do you think that taking action actually can alleviate those kinds of thoughts and fears on some level? It can help. Taking real worldly action can do that, right?
Absolutely.
I've found that in my experience, that if I'm feeling fearful or worried about my finances or another area of my life, if I just decide, you know what, I'm going to get into action here. I'm going to make a plan, even if it's a simple plan. I'm going to get started one step after the next, and I'm just going to start where I am, because I am where I am and I can't change that.
Exactly.
Except by taking the next step in front of me. So by doing that, I found that even in the worst of situations, just taking that initial step, like getting started and keeping going. I always love to tell people, two of my secrets to a more successful, fulfilling life are: one, get started, and two, keep going, right? And just being
Amen.
bold, initial step. So with regard to a budget or a plan or a spending plan or a saving plan, whatever people want to call it for themselves and how they feel most comfortable calling their budget, what changes are you seeing now for most people? You know, not people who may already have great wealth in savings or in investments, but for the average person who relies on their income for their everyday expenses and for their savings, et cetera, et cetera. What would you see are some important shifts to make in their budgets right now in response to the crisis?
So when it comes to budgeting, it's going to be very important to bring a lot of clarity to the exercise of sitting down and looking at our numbers. We have to face the numbers. That's something very important. So sitting down, facing the numbers from a place of whatever numbers we're about to see. How can we remain grateful for whatever we're about to see? How can we tap into a little bit of gratitude so that gives us the strength to sit down and be like, okay, let's look at my numbers. So first things first, when we're talking, before we talk budget, there's 4 items that we have to have very clear in front of us. That's how much money is coming in, how much money is coming out. 2 things. Then the other 2, how much do I own and how much do I owe? So those 4 items, we have to do the math and just face the numbers, right? We have to learn what we have to work with when it comes to the next step of really focusing on our budget or our spending plan. So once we have our budget in front of us, one of the things that I'm seeing that has changed during COVID is that now we are, as we said at the beginning, we're kind of forced to take a deeper look at our priorities. We're kind of forced to identify needs versus wants, right? And now if we allow ourselves to learn from what we're going through and to grow from this experience, this is going to be the time to look at how have we spent money in the past and really start evaluating our habits. Because now all those habits, if we have negative habits that we've been dragging with us, like, you know, sometimes I have a weakness and I like online shopping and I end up just buying and I don't think about it until after I purchase. Those are habits that we need to deal with now, right? So that's one of some of the things that we've seen is how now when it comes to budgeting, people have to stop and really evaluate, if I don't have enough money coming in to cover my expenses, that's when we really need to step back, evaluate our priorities, And I like to call, like, there's 3 steps really when it comes to this process of budgeting during COVID. Is number one, evaluate where you are today, like here, right? You're here, you're there, and you're how. So you're here is sitting down and writing these numbers down that I was mentioning, right? What's how much is coming in this month, how much is coming out, how much is going to have to come out every month, regardless of how much comes in. Let's face those numbers. And when we're talking about the here, it's going to be important to start prioritizing those expenses, really start dividing needs versus wants, right? Necessary versus unnecessary. So a lot of people are cutting back expenses like in no other time before. So this is the time to learn what your priorities are and identify maybe our priorities. We were not putting that much attention on our priorities before, right? Our priorities were a little skewed. Maybe we were not prioritizing saving. Maybe we were prioritizing other things. So this is teaching us that we should all evaluate our priorities and make sure that our money is working towards those priorities. We should all make sure that this teaches us how important it is to save, even if it's a little bit, right? Sometimes I hear people, well, I just have like $20 left at the end of the month. Well, you save those $20, you know? And sometimes, unfortunately, we tend to have the habit of saving at the end. If I have money left, I save. This is the time to really address those habits, because when we save, we're really paying ourselves. That's what we're doing. We're paying our future selves. We're helping our finances be stronger and more resilient for the future. So that's evaluating the here, right? Writing those numbers when it comes to that budget. Then in that budget, it's going to be important to start thinking about there, right? Where do I want my budget to be? How much money do I want coming in the future months? So that once we evaluate, this is where I am, this is where I want to be, then we can start talking about how am I going to get there? The journey for us to get to those places where, I would love to have an emergency savings in a couple of months so that if we go through something like this again, I'm in a different place.
Right.
That strategy, we're going to have to be very flexible and very open to what's going to come our way, especially for people that right now are feeling that tension and that pain point of not having enough money coming in. This is the time to be creative, right? Identifying when you're writing down, this is what I owe, what I own. Start thinking about your skill set. Start thinking about your abilities so that we can maybe identify what other areas of opportunity, what other areas or potential sources of income we have never looked at before. This might be the time to start looking at other things. This might be the time to even just take a breath and see, was I even happy with the job I had, right? Like, do I want that job back? Do I want to make changes? Because we're forced to make changes now. So it's up to us to make changes for the better. And it's up to us to take our finances and start utilizing money as a tool. Because at the end of the day, money is a tool. But in our society, we give it so much weight. We give so much emotion to money. When at the end of the day, money is this taboo that it's up to us to turn it into, is just this tool that if I'm strategic enough and if I have the clarity of where I want to be, I'll be able to deal with it with a more objective approach.
We've done a number of webinars on health through COVID-19, immune boosting strategies. And one of the things that struck me is that this particular time, this outbreak, I'm hoping becomes a trigger for society to reprioritize their own health.
Yes.
And I think if more people were eating well and exercising and getting good sleep and taking really better care of themselves, they might be less fearful right now. I mean, they might still be indoors and practicing social distancing, but the level of fear might be less because they feel more confident in their body's ability to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
So just on those same lines, isn't this a great time for people, like a great impetus for people to also look at their habits, their relationships, their thoughts, their perspectives around money? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's such a
Mm-hmm.
wake-up call at how many Americans just filed for unemployment. I mean, tens of millions, right? And so it also just seems like such a wake-up call, this whole crisis, in some pretty profound major ways for an unfathomable amount of people. So I'm hoping that people in general, people on this broadcast, use the crisis well. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
terrible situation, and what are the silver linings here? And one of them might be, for some people here today, is really taking another look at their financial lives and creating a healthier overall life because of it. Do you feel similarly? Or
Oh my God, I agree 100%. I was actually reading about what are the biggest factors that affect our health, right? And genetics, our environment, our relationships have a big toll on our health. So when I was reading that, I thought about finances, right? Our financial health. And I noticed that a lot of those three factors can be they can translate into finance, right? And how I translate them is like genetics, right? What did we learn about money growing up? What this is the time, you guys, to ask yourself these questions, because going through these questions is going to help us not only come to a healthier place with our relationship with money, but also start making those adjustments that are going to allow us to have a just a happier financial life. So asking yourself, right, what facts or fictions was I taught about money growing up, right? Other question, what feelings and fears about money did I absorb when I was growing up? What childhood lessons and money illusions have I carried into my adulthood without even knowing? Because we go back to that concept. If money is such a taboo and we don't talk about these things, unconsciously we repeat a lot of things that we saw, good and bad. So it's up to us to take the good and work on the bad things that we dragged along, right? So this is a very, very good time to take a break, stop, maybe kind of like look at our finances from an outsider perspective and identifying, if I learn things that brought me to where I am today, what are those things that are serving me? Let's keep them. What are the things that might not be serving me? And those things, we have to work hard to let them go. And that, to me, that's one of the biggest pieces within finance. And unfortunately, we don't talk about that piece enough. We tend to cover more about, once you do have money, let's talk about investing and let's talk about, but at the end of the day, wealth is not achieved overnight. Wealth is achieved over time. Financial freedom is achieved over time. And it's a product of being disciplined. It's a product of being mindful and thoughtful about what type of financial life we want to have. So that definitely that effect in our health within everything we do with our finances, I see it loud and clear. These times are teaching us how important it is going to be to take a look within. How do I deal with money? That concept of the genetic aspect, right? Like if we translate it, what did we learn about money growing up, or what didn't we learn about money growing up? Because if there's things that we didn't learn, there's so many resources available. There's so much information out there for us to start learning more and start gaining that knowledge. Sometimes knowledge is what we need to gain more confidence when it comes to dealing with money. One thing that I do want to mention is when people tell me, oh, Irene, I'm just terrible with money. I'm just terrible at saving. I immediately tell them, that's the last time I want to hear you say something like that. Because those things you're saying, you're putting them out in the universe. You are perpetuating a cycle of bad management, bad financial management. Is that what you want? How come we're not looking at, you know what? This is the type of relationship I want with my money. What can I do now? What little changes, what little decisions can I start changing, right? Like we go back to the conversation about habits. Do we have the habit of saving automatically when we have a little money coming in? Do we have do we have the habit even when we're going grocery shopping? Right now, it's all about the spending. The biggest focus right now is how are we spending money, because that's the biggest thing we have under our control at this point. So some people have the really good habit of making a list before they go shopping. That way they stay within their budget and they don't overbuy, especially in times like now, because we might have all been there. Right now, since we feel that uncertainty, we go to the grocery store. If you don't have a list, you know, first, you're gonna leave that place with so much more that we don't need because we're panic buying, right? And if we were to step back, make that list, if we were to step back, and also depending on the situation in which we are, if we really don't have that income coming in, there's a lot of resources that maybe this is a time for us to take advantage of them, because that's why they exist. Like I'm talking about food pantries or the food bank. Sometimes our ego has a very big role when it comes to our finances, our pride. There's no room for that. In a healthy relationship with money, there's no room for that. We have to be mindful, and we have to understand if sometimes we need to ask for help, if sometimes we need to file for unemployment, if we need to tap into other resources, that's okay. That's what those resources are there for, you know. So it's important to consider what resources do I have available that are going to allow me, give me some breathing room in my budget while I find something else, right? This is about being strategic. And the more objective we are, the more informed we are, identify what are your resources. The reason why I was saying it's going to be important to actually put in paper or in the computer, however you guys feel more comfortable budgeting, go item by item, especially spending, go item by item, because a lot of those items, maybe we can right now, depending on what we're talking about, like for example, some student loans because of COVID, actually we were not required to pay the loans, and the interest is not going to be charged depending on what type of loan we have. If we don't go item by item, and if we don't do our homework and our research, we would be paying that money when technically now we could be setting that money aside, right, to weather the coming months. So item by item, and asking yourself, can I pause this expense? Could I maybe talk to the person that I owe this money to, or call my bank and see if there's a way, like if right now they have a program where they are pushing some of these payments. So a lot of banks are offering that. A lot of mortgages, we can postpone paying our mortgage for later. So it's about finding those resources before we spend the money, right? So maybe we're going to find a lot of resources, and then our spending is going to come way down, and that's going to give us some breathing room for the month ahead.
Wow. So as far as, I want to ask you a quick question about, speaking of debt, in the budget, for those of us who are actively paying off as much debt as we can, maybe beyond the minimum payment, it would strike me as a good time now to shift that priority and save as much as possible while paying the minimum payments. Would you agree with that? Because of the crisis that we're in, that to have as much of a safety net as possible that we're continuing to build, seems like it would be more important now than trying to pay off debt as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
It really depends on the circumstances of each individual, because if you have more job security than others, then continue doing what you're doing. If you have that job security and your budget hasn't changed much. But if your budget has been highly affected, then absolutely just try to cover minimum payments so that you don't affect your credit score. Try to take advantage of those debts that, as we were talking earlier, right now they're being forgiven and they're going to pause interest payments. So if you have debts that allow you to do that, take advantage of that now. And really just covering the minimum payments for sure. Another thing we can do now, when we going back to being proactive, right? Being proactive doesn't mean that you're all the time doing things like you're applying to jobs all day long. No, it means identifying what are some steps that you can take now that are going to get you closer to that space where you want to be. If that space is that feeling calm because you know that you have more stability, whatever that space is. When we go to when we're talking about debt, it's important to understand that managing your debt means, yes, paying my minimum payments, but it also means right now interest rates are at historic lows. So maybe this is a time to refinance. Maybe this is a time to call our card companies and say, hey, I've been responsible with my card. I was wondering if I could get a better rate.
Wow.
You know, and we're being proactive. We're doing something that's within our control.
That's brilliant. And how about for those of us that have a practice of tithing or giving our money to charitable contributions? Like, let's say some people here have a practice of 10% or 5% of their income goes to charitable organizations or their church or their synagogue or whatever it might be. You know,
yeah.
Some people believe, okay, during a time of crisis, if you're really tight on income, then it's a good time to stop doing that temporarily. But others say, you know what? They have such faith in the power of tithing, and they believe that there's something spiritual behind it, that if they continue, even during times of crisis, that sort of karmic seed will be, on some level, returned, and they'll have a smoother financial life. Some people have different beliefs around this, right? But what is your take on tithing and how tithing practices might change now or not?
We go back to each individual and your financial situation, because if you have more security, then you can continue focusing on charitable giving. But what happens when you don't have that certainty anymore? What happens when you are really tight in your budget? We go back to the term sustainability. If we're trying to help those around us, but we are not well, our help is not sustainable. And the real help is that sustainable help. So if we're feeling that we're at a point where we're really, really tight and we might need that money to be able to pay rent, we are going to need that money to be able to cover healthcare expenses, or you name it, things that are very important, things that are basic needs in our budget. It's okay. It's okay to stop charitable giving for now until we're in a position to give again. And really focusing on kindness is free. Like there's a lot of ways in which we can contribute to our community and in which we can contribute to helping those around us without money, right? Maybe like evaluating, can I volunteer somehow? Can I, right? Like there's other ways in which we can contribute with time and energy versus money when we don't have as much.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Or what about the approach of saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to put this on pause for the time being.
Yeah, exactly.
When things normalize again or more income starts to roll in, then I'm going to make up for it. I'm going to give more, and I'm going to get to my, whatever I would have given before, 5 or 10%, what I usually would give before. I'm going to make up for not done that and still contribute the same amount. It's just a delayed.
Yeah, exactly. But we have to make sure that if we're going to give, that we are, it's like when we talk about health. If you're sick, how are you going to take care of the health of others? You can't.
Right.
You have to be healthy yourself to take care of the health of others. So it's the same with our money. If we are gonna be okay, if we're gonna be stable financially speaking, then that's a different story, because then we can continue to contribute, then we can continue to donate. But it's okay to put things at pause. We go back to that pride, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to start saying no to some expenses that you've always had, because now what's the priority? The priority is your health. The priority is making sure that your boat is floating, right? So if that requires for us to say no or for us to pause certain expenses, that's okay. That's part of the journey, right? In our financial journey, nothing is going to be like we thought, right? Life is constant change. We forget, but life is constant change. And now we are feeling the changes much more because they're very abrupt, very volatile, right? But at the end of the day, change and uncertainty, it's a given factor of living. But that's sometimes the beauty of it. So how can we take the situation around us to learn from it and to grow from it and to maybe financially identify some of the things that we say yes to all the time, and identify what are going to be my priorities. If I need to reduce my budget for my giving, like my charitable giving, let's prioritize. What are the organizations that I feel like I want to continue to support? And what are those organizations that maybe right now we're going to put a pause to? And it's okay. That's why I go back to be very careful with your pride when we're strategizing. Because pride and the ego, they're going to come in and they're going to worry about, oh, the future. So when you're going through that, breathe. Literally, stop, take a few breaths, and remember what we were talking about, being mindful. Being mindful is being fully present. No judgment, just fully present, full acceptance, and just coming from a place of, okay, this is where I am. Where do I want to be? What is within my control to get there?
Wow, it's a very compassionate approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
The compassionate approach with oneself, and that's another thing too. This might be a good time for people to practice self-compassion and having empathy and compassion for oneself, instead of, our friend Gina, our mutual friend Gina Carvajal,
Mm-hmm.
told me something I thought was really brilliant, which was, just don't put too much pressure on yourself during this time. Be gentle and kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been the type of person who just wants to drive and go hard, and as far as work goes or
Mm-hmm.
achievement goes, and 2 months ago when the lockdowns occurred in California and the United States, it was like I just couldn't really get done the things I wanted to get done, and that's when she told me that. And I thought it was really brilliant. So utilizing this whole situation, this global situation, as a way to practice that spiritual self-love and that self-compassion just seems like in a funny kind of way, in an interesting kind of way, seems like a good opportunity to look at a lot of important things that were just easy to fall by the wayside, such as self-care and just smelling the roses and going for beach walks and a lot of things. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And valuing those things that are free, that sometimes we take for granted, right? Like valuing our health much more, valuing spending time with loved ones, valuing getting to know our loved ones, because in the day-to-day, sometimes we're so busy that we don't really have like long, in-depth conversations. This is a time to take advantage of that, right? When we are being mindful, we take advantage of what the present is giving us. And right now, the present is giving us different things that we're used to. So how am I going to take advantage of those things, right? That's really important. And I think another thing when it comes to that concept of self-care and compassion, there's a lot of illusions, money illusions that we grow up seeing or learning. Some of these illusions might be that money buys happiness. That's an illusion. That's so not true. Another illusion could be that your net worth is your self-worth. That's a terrible illusion, right? If we grew up absorbing that, if we feel that, we need to get rid of that right away, because that is very toxic for our financial health. Very, very toxic. And that really can get on the way to that concept of self-care. Because self-care, when I think of self-care financially, self-care is honoring what you want to do with your life as a human being and making your money work towards that, not the other way around. Money should never be the end goal. Money is a tool for us to get to our end goals.
Right. Wow. That's wonderful. Hey, I just want to let our audience know that if you have any questions that you'd like Irene to answer here, or to give her perspective on, you can feel free to leave the question by pressing the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you'll have the ability to type in your question there. Or alternatively, you can just click the chat button and leave your question in the chat box. In addition to, if you're on Facebook, you can just leave your question right there in the comment section about anything to do with money, how it relates to the current COVID lockdowns and the COVID outbreak, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an open door right now. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them. So let's dive into a little bit more about, is there anything more regarding the plan, the budgeting process that you would like to address, whether it be the actual logistics of it or the way people approach it with their attitude or their perspective about it?
Yes, so going back to that concept of when we're adding those numbers, there's something very valuable about the exercise of sitting down and like adding our expenses, because when we're doing it, we come to this realization of, this is where my money goes. This is what I spend money on, sometimes unconsciously. So having that clarity of, this is how I've been spending my money. When we're looking at our budget, one of the biggest things is going to be have your priorities in mind, so that when we're budgeting, we always separate that needs versus wants. If we separate needs versus wants, our budget is going to allow us to have that clarity of, okay, this is what I need to live, to be okay. All these things are extras. So all these things, maybe for now I postpone them, or maybe what I'm gonna reduce those expenses, right? It's really about coming in to see your budget from that place of acceptance. And as you're going through it, just imagine that you are, and I know this can be challenging, but write a different name on top of the budget. Like, imagine that you're doing somebody else's budget. When you do that, you can be a little more objective, and you can start looking at some expenses, and you can add, okay, is that a want or is that a need? Is that a priority, right? And asking yourself these questions, you can get to two pictures. You can get to a budget that is the current budget, or like, especially if we're looking at last month's budget, that's what was, right? That's kind of the base. Then we can start creating this ideal budget for the next following months. That's going to be the exercise, because when we're going through the budget, it's not only like for us to do, like, think about what we've been spending in the past. It's really about, what are the things there that I have to prioritize? What are the things there that I need to change? And really making sure that when you're covering everything, you're covering what comes in, what comes out. And we're starting to look at our budget as something that is going to help us navigate our finances. A budget, it's a tool, right? It's a tool meant to give us clarity. So what were you going to say?
Well, it just seems right now that it seems just at the center of what we need to be looking at during the crisis is that budget or spending plan or saving, whatever people want to call it, to be comfortable with it. It just seems that is when the numbers are clear and you can play with the numbers and set up your numbers so it leads to the greatest amount of financial health and resiliency through this all. That budget, I mean, to me, I can't really think of much more of an important practice right now financially as far as actual logistics go. I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, but just practically speaking, like for me, that feels like the most important thing for me to be doing. Hey, we have a question here, and it's not about budgets, but Dee is actually asking, can you speak about scarcity consciousness versus prosperity consciousness during this time, and and tools to feel more expanded and free? What a great question. And if anyone else has other questions, we're going to get
Please. That's a beautiful question, because when we're talking about our mindset, it's that idea of I'm terrible with money, or I don't have, or net worth is not self-worth. The amount of money you have left, if you have left at the end of the month, that should not really affect who we are as a human being. So when it comes to our mentality, between, like, it's that concept of looking at the glass half full, right? So this is going to be a very important time to practice gratitude, right? Every time when you're going through your budget, every time you catch yourself going towards that negative aspect of the scarcity mindset, find one thing you're grateful for. Find one thing in that budget that you're grateful for, and try to do that shift, right? Every time we have a negative thought coming in, we need to substitute that with a positive one. And now it's the time to tap into creating this mentality of abundance around us. How do we do that? Really making the most with what we already have, right? Looking at making an inventory, even when we're at home now. This thought of abundance can come. This is a good time to do a cleanse at home and start taking things that, maybe I don't use this anymore. Oh, maybe I need to let these go. So starting to look at all the things that you do have and maybe moving things around, maybe identifying, when you're doing a cleanse and you start looking at things that don't serve you or you don't longer need, you immediately start feeling that, oh my God, I do have a lot of things, right? Oh, I do have a lot. So that's one way to start tapping into abundance, by starting with what you already have. So start letting go of certain things. Create some space in your life for abundance to come in, right? To get a little unstuck. Then another way is, I think that the feeling of abundance, it's highly related to that feeling when we feel grounded. Right? When we feel grounded, we are looking at the other things that might not be monetary that we do have, right? So we create more abundance by focusing on the things that we do have and the things that we are grateful for, and focusing on, let's go back to those skill sets that we were talking about, right? Let's go back to the questions we asked what good habits did you learn growing up? Focus on the good things that you've learn, the good things that you can put in practice, because those things are things that you have, right? That feeds into that concept of abundance. Do things right now that don't cost us, are free, and they're wonderful things, like go out on a walk, right? Go enjoy a little bit of sun. Those feelings, taking control of the things that we have available and being grateful for them, that is going to help us go from that scarcity mentality to that abundance. Why don't we focus about what we do have? That's what we should focus on at this point.
Well, I also want to chime in here. From my personal experience, the times in my life when I've decided to gain total clarity about the numbers, about what am I dealing with, what do I own, what do I owe, what's the income, what are the expenses, and just from all angles, getting a very clear picture of my financial reality right here, right now. What I've found is that the amount of clarity and confidence and peace in just knowing where I am, like in a practical way, is so noticeable. So, I mean, I know this doesn't seem like it's a direct strategy for shifting financial consciousness into prosperity consciousness, but I did find that it was actually working with the practical side of this and getting clear and being honest with myself about where I am right now with the numbers. No lying to myself about, oh, it's doing great or doing bad.
Yeah.
Where am I really?
Yeah. Perception versus reality.
It's so empowering to know where you are, I think. Would you agree, or what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And when you were mentioning that concept of clarity, right now, if we are going through, maybe we're really tight in our expenses, and we're looking at the fridge, right? And this is just a very simple example. Maybe our fridge doesn't look as full as it usually looks, right? That can really affect our mentality every time we open that fridge. So we go back to that. Let's do an inventory, just like you did that inventory about our money. Take everything out of your pantry, clean your kitchen, and position everything just front and center so it feels more full, right? So we can do that in many aspects of our life. How can we spread things so that, especially when we're thinking like food, right? How can we maybe prepare a lot of food for all the week, and then we place it there in the fridge so we open and we see something very different, right? So it's really, sometimes it's about those little details, right? Those little exercises. When we're talking about getting clarity about what we have, just like when we go through to the fridge and we see, oh, I need to go do groceries, and I make the list. When we do our budget, it's something very similar. So if you do your budget, it's important to go back to it. It's not something that we do and we let go of, right? We have to, one important piece that we haven't touched on is the accountability piece. Allow yourself to really squeeze as much as you can out of this time in terms of what we're learning. If you start getting into the habit of overseeing, like going over your budget, especially depending on the situation, at least once a month, we should be looking at our budget now and identify areas of improvement and also areas of opportunity, right? We were talking about how everything is shifting, and this is a good time to evaluate our income, right? Maybe now is the time to start thinking about diversifying my income, right? What can I start changing about my finances today so that in the future, when we go through something unexpected, we are in a different place? What place do we want to be in, right? Our minds are so powerful. Our mindset is so, so powerful. We can have all the money in the world, but if we don't have the right mindset, it doesn't serve us. So it all starts with being grateful. That's very important. Even in uncertain times, we all have things, even one thing that we're grateful for. So cling to that thing, really bring that thing front and center. And if you find yourself, like in yoga, we call it our monkey mind, right? Our thoughts can be dark in these times, and it's okay. We are all there. We all have those thoughts of worry and anxiety and uncertainty. So manage those thoughts, right? Take a moment, find a place at home where you can feel, where you have some peace and quiet, or where you create these spaces where you feel at home, where you feel grounded, where you feel you're reminded of good things. If you're feeling something in your head, deal with it. Don't ignore it, because that over time has a toll on our health. So have spaces or have activities that bring you peace, bring you joy. So every time that you're going through those thoughts, you do that, right? It's all about substituting, right? If we have something negative, how are we going to go from that negative to a positive? Have a strategy.
And this whole conversation just brings to light this integration between the logistics or the mechanics of how to approach our financial lives in an empowered, productive way, as well as integrating the consciousness side, the mindset, the consciousness, the beliefs, the value system, the emotions, the neuro associations in our financial life. And for the longest time, I tried to shift my financial reality through just the practical thing, the budget, the knowing where I am exactly, the insurance, and getting all the logistical mechanics, the worldly affairs in order. But what I really needed was more income. And I will say that it was only when I really emphasized my internal game, so they call it the inner game of money, or my internal landscape in relation to money, that within a couple months of making that a priority in my life, that things really began to shift and my income improved and got to a place where I had a way more security and way more comfort. I mean, so it was really amazing to see how, no matter how many years I went through of trying to shift my financial reality just with the practical side of the budgets, etc., none of it worked to increase my income. It was only when I addressed my scarcity consciousness that things really started changing. It didn't happen immediately. It took, 2-3 months or so, but it was just a matter of, even without seeing results immediately, having that faith and that belief that, what, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep working with my mind. I'm going to use the affirmations. I'm going to keep focusing on what I do have instead of what I don't have. I'm going to keep focusing on what I can give instead of trying to take as much as I can, et cetera, et cetera. So it was just really helpful and interesting to find that things only really changed for me as far as income goes when I addressed the inner stuff. So somebody's asking another question. D would like to hear more about inner game from you. The inner game of money.
The inner game of money. So everybody has their own approach to money, right? Everybody has different pain points. So for me, when I think of your inner game, it's about the strategy that works for you, right? Everybody's different. Everybody has unique goals. Everybody has different things that we're carrying, good or bad, in terms of how we deal with money. So that inner game is identifying what is it that works, right? When something clicks, that's when you realize, okay, that's really my strategy. That's going to be my approach. Like you mentioned something so powerful, that concept of once you took care of the practical items, once you took care of the numbers, you identified that for you're at your best game or the best strategy when you combine the numbers with your mindset. And that the mindset piece is just so essential, because sometimes we have everything we need, but if we don't believe that we're worthy of getting the money we deserve, if we don't believe that we can actually get different sources of income, or that we can get paid doing what we love, believing that is the first step. If you don't believe that, you're your own obstacle in your financial path. So you're not on your best game. But when you connect what you want as a human being with what you're doing with your money, that's when magic happens, let me tell you.
Sometimes in our society, there's this belief that's prevalent of, well, money is evil, or you shouldn't really pay much attention to me because money's dirty, or the filthy rich, or the whatever. But you're talking about really utilizing money as a tool to fulfill your potential as a human being and live the best quality of life that you can. And from that place, I know we spoke earlier of that overflowing into the world around you, as a service, or whatever your form of service is. So empowering yourself so you can then be empowered to serve the world around you at your best. But can you address this money belief that may be a disempowering belief, that there's something, not kosher about money, and so we shouldn't really be talking about it or thinking about it or wanting to organize our financial life in a healthy way? What would you say about that?
That's such an interesting point, because we were talking earlier, like a little bit of background. I used to feel that way, right? I studied finance because I saw how much problems it could cause to not have clarity about it. So that's why I got into it. And when I was just studying and going through school and learning about investing and learning about the like brokers and their roles and the stock market, I remember I would think like, oh, I never want to do that. And then like years passed, and I've learned that money is not evil. Some people are, right? Money is a piece of paper or a currency, a coin. Money is a tool. We are the ones that give power to money. We are the ones that decide if we want to use it for good or we want to use it for bad, right? So this idea that, oh, the financial sector, like that, sometimes there's a lack of trust around this sector, of even the concept of money is evil. Money can bring the worst out of people. The problem is that if people have the wrong intentions, yes, money is going to bring horrible sides of people, but it's not really money's fault. Money is a tool. It's not a person, right? So the first thing we have to do is look at money as the tool it is, and then really kind of shift that, not blame, but really shift that sentiment of the bad ones. It's not money that's bad. It's some people and how they use money for bad things. That's a very different story, right? And when we start understanding that there's a lot of people that have a lot of challenges when it comes to their mentality around money. A lot of people that have their self-worth attached to their money. That's when some people just get lost, right? That's when some people look at money as the end goal. That's when things can just really go the wrong direction, go the wrong way.
Right. Sure.
Right. So it's just important. Remember, money is a tool, and we are the ones that give it power for good or power for bad. And the more we are conscious of how much money, because at the end of the day, we all need money. Money is that white elephant in the room that we don't talk about. The more we talk about it, the more we're going to fight those conceptions, and the more we're going to help people start utilizing money as a tool it is and as a catalyst for good, because money is needed to create projects, money is needed to change a lot of the things that are not working with our current systems. This is teaching us a lot about what works and what doesn't work in the world right now. So money is going to be essential to make those changes. It's true. So how can we start really making sure that first, as a human being, I have clarity about the role of money in my life? Once I'm there, then I'll be able to use money for good and really start spreading that, right? How can we use money for good as a society? And how can we start identifying those people that are not using it for good, those people that have the wrong intentions? Just kind of stay away from those spaces.
I've heard the analogy that money's like a magnifier. So if somebody is, an angry, unethical kind of person, then having a lot of money is just going to magnify that and their effect on the world. And if you're a really good-hearted, person who wants to serve the greater good, etc., then having money can only help empower you to do more of that. So I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it. And it seems like if you're somebody who wants to utilize your financial life for good, for the good of society, or for the good of people around you, that then it's a good thing for you. I mean, it might be the way someone else might use it might be evil, but the way you're going to use it is good. So maybe it's not as black and white as money's good or evil. Maybe it's more like, hey, the way each individual chooses to utilize money can do good or do harm.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Exactly.
Great. So now let me see if we have any more questions here. Kelly has a very interesting question. She is asking, how can we use money for good regarding the climate crisis?
I love that question. Love that question. Yes, that's what we need to start focusing on, people. So let's think about how economies and change works. Every time we want to implement a new solution, money is needed, right? Especially when we're trying to scale different solutions. Think renewable energy. When renewable energy started, a lot of money was needed to prove the concept, right? So that's one way in which we can utilize our money for good. If we start taking our money and looking at what companies, what industries, what sectors are really focusing on helping alleviate global warming, or really focusing on climate, how are we going to address climate change? There's a lot of concepts waiting to be proven, but they don't have the capital, right? And unfortunately, a lot of these processes are very expensive. It's similar to when we're seeing what we see in healthcare, right? When we're trying to get a new vaccine going, there's always that need of capital to prove the concept. And at the beginning, those processes are expensive. So that's one way in which we can utilize our money towards those businesses, those industries, those causes, so that they can prove the concept and they can scale those concepts to different countries, to different areas. So that's one way. There's capital is needed to really increase the reach of a lot of solutions to alleviate climate change. So putting our money there, it's one way in which we can help.
Right. Hey, we have another, so you're saying like every dollar you spend is like your vote almost. So when you're going through the budget, you keep in mind, okay, I'm going to buy from these companies, or I'm going to buy from this store, and not from those companies.
Yeah, it's like when we're talking about money, when I was mentioning, think about your priorities. I'm also talking about your priorities as a human being, right? Because if you want to feel whole with your money and you want to make sure that you are one with your money, like meaning that you're utilizing your money for good and for things that are important to you, think about what are your priorities, what are the causes that you care the most about, and make sure that you are that has a space in your budget. And for people that right now they're like, but I don't have the money right now, your time and energy, right, your skill set, those are so valuable, so valuable. You cannot put a price tag on someone helping with their time and their energy. You cannot put a price tag on that, right? So also, like, being creative about ways in which we can help for causes that are very dear to us.
Sure. Now we have a couple more questions that have come in the Q&A section. But as you're speaking, I love money, this area of finance so much. I'm so passionate about that. As you speak, just ideas are just rolling through my head. And it just seems like if people can make this area one of the primary focuses in just one of the primary areas in their life that they focus on in order to experience a higher quality of life, or as high of a quality of life as they can, that just that focus alone seems to be part of that prosperity consciousness. Like just the fact that you're here and you're paying attention to this area in a deliberate, conscious, mindful manner seems to be one of the prerequisites for actually setting yourself up to win here. So somebody's asking a question, he's anonymously. And by the way, if you have a question, you can actually ask it anonymously by, when you click the Q&A button in Zoom, you can just click anonymous. This anonymous attendee says health is their priority, but they're spending beyond what they have on food and supplements. They have PTSD, and it's important that they get excellent nutrition, sleep, exercise, etc. But they cannot make more money right now.
So I would say in circumstances like that, it's going to be very important to identify resources around you, right? What are some free resources that we can tap into? And that's kind of like the first aspect, so that some of your expenses, if you can alleviate some of those expenses, like for example, we were talking about the food bank, right? Maybe let's tap into some of those resources so that we make sure that we have money set aside for health and anything coming our way. So that's going to be important. Identify resources around you that are free, that's what they're for. Tap into those resources so that you can reduce your expenses. And when it comes to nutrition, one important thing is considering that we don't need a lot of money to eat well. Sometimes it's about being strategic about our budget, like going to the grocery store and prioritizing fruits and vegetables that are in season. They are way cheaper than things that are not in season. So that's being strategic like that. It's one way that can help. But under your situation, I would say really, really focus on tapping into current resources so that you can free some funds for unexpected expenses that might come health-wise. Just stay focusing on the aspects of health that are under our control, that don't cost money, right? Like making sure you're getting good rest, making sure that you're eating well, all of the things that are within our control to have a healthy life. Those, just make sure that they're front and center in your life right now. And really just exploring, depending on where you live, depending on depending on where you live, and if you qualify for certain programs, I would say tap into all resources available at your disposal. Just do the research and really just tap into them so that you can free some money for anything unexpected.
Absolutely. And by the way, your video's off. I don't know why, but
that is because my battery's dying. So I'm gonna I'm gonna grab my charger.
Okay, great. And then in a few moments we'll conclude here. But I just want to say, it's the person who asked that question. I don't have your name here, but my father is an integrative medical doctor, and he's brilliant. So he might have some good insight for you about how you can navigate this time given your financial situation. So what I'm going to do is actually, in the chat box here, I'm going to give you my email address. And if you want to contact me, then I will forward your question on to him, and we'll see what he has to say about that. So let me just briefly type this in here. Okay, hopefully you've received that. If you didn't, it's forrest@thecn.org. Again, forrest@thecn.org. That is THECN.org. So feel free to shoot me an email, and we'll see what he has to say if you'd like. Okay, doesn't look like we have any more questions here, unless somebody asks one before we conclude. But is there anything else that you'd like to share during this? I mean, you've given us so much fascinating, interesting, empowering knowledge and information and perspective here. And it's really heartwarming to see that you're able to help people so much, and that we're able to do that through this webinar here. So is there anything more that you'd like to share to people here? And if not, I'd love for you to share how people can contact you and continue their relationship with you beyond this webinar. Mm-hmm.
Well, first and foremost, I wanna thank you for setting this up. For me, it's just such a joy to be able to have these conversations, because I know that that's something that we need to start changing. We need to start addressing that taboo of talking about money. Money is just a tool. We give it its power. So the more we talk about it, the more we share, the more we help each other out. Hey, I did this for my budget. It really worked. We can really help each other out just sharing sometimes. So I'm very, very grateful and very honored to be here today. Really, I just want to remind people, we've got this. We've got this. We just have to be very strategic. It's going to be important to reach out for help. Utilize resources around you. Don't be really dealing with that anxiety. Don't postpone it. Don't postpone it, because it's unhealthy, and health is #1 priority right now. So definitely focusing on what's within your control. It's one of the biggest things. If we think of what's going on right now, when you're going through this anxiety, imagine that you have these two things around you, right? One is what we can't control, and the other is what we can control. So we can't control how the economy is going to bounce back, how long it's going to take. We can't control tax laws. We can't control the stock market, but we can control how we react to them. We can't control how informed we stay. We can't control how we manage the thoughts around them, and how if we twist it and look at something that, like, from a place of gratitude and from a place of, okay, how can I be proactive about this? That is completely within our control. right? So this is a time to focus on what we can control. Focus on spending. Someone just wrote, grow your own vegetables.
Right.
Yes, this is a time to think, how can I be sustainable? How can I tweak my finances in a way that I have more stability moving forward, right?
Sure.
Take advantage. Yes, go ahead.
Healthier too. When you grow your own vegetables.
Yes. Yeah, oh, but much healthier.
Much healthier.
So really, this is a time to take a moment to evaluate your situation. Keep what's good, start letting go of what's not helping you, and really allow this situation to help you grow, right? This is a time for us to grow and learn. And unfortunately, we work, as Forrest mentioned, we were kind of forced to look at our finances and face them. It's time, right? It's time that we do that as a society. It's time for us to look at money and the role it has and look at our responsibility in the equation. And just really be careful with your thoughts. Compassion, be compassionate, okay? It's so common right now to judge ourselves and to focus on the negatives and to really let ourselves go thinking, oh, am I gonna be okay? Of course you're gonna be okay, right? Believe that you're gonna be okay so that you already tackle your finances with the right mindset, okay? So it's been an honor to be here, guys. You got this. Remember the power of your mindset and address that. Don't procrastinate on dealing with those thoughts. It's going to be important to address them and really be proactive, focusing on what we can control so that we can move forward. Thank you again for this wonderful time, and I wish you all the best. If you want to reach me, you can reach me at my email from my job, work as a financial advisor. It's irene.kelly@edwardjones.com. You can also reach me at my office. It's 805-565-8793. And I'm also in social media. I'm in different platforms offering more education around financial health. And I also do yoga because it's important right now to have a balance. It's not all my money. Remember, we have to stay grateful, stay grounded. So there's the most important things in life are free. So that's what we need to tap into in these difficult times.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us here. I could talk to you about this for hours. I mean,
I know.
But it looks like the audience has really gotten a lot out of it too. Now, I was going to just quickly say a few final housekeeping remarks. But before I do, I just want to encourage everyone to hang in there. I remember when I was a teen, I fell ill for years. I was really sick and in a lot of pain for years. And what really helped was one of my teachers at the time telling me, hang in there, because clearly I wasn't just going to escape from that situation the next day or within weeks. It was going to take time to navigate through it. And the fact that they came along and said, hang in there, was like so helpful, just to attach to that kind of perspective and become more resilient. That's what it really helped me to do. So I would encourage everyone here, if this is a particularly rough time for you, just hang in there and utilize some of the practices and principles we've outlined here today. Now, as far as this webinar was hosted by the Consciousness Network. I'm the executive director of the Consciousness Network. If you feel like making a donation to the network to cover some of the costs of hosting the webinar, you can feel free to do so, and that ability will pop up when this webinar ends. You'll automatically be taken to our donation page, or you can look at the email that went out today, and that will go out after this. And we thank you in advance for your contributions. I wish you all well, and please be in touch and be well. Wishing you the best. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, guys. Take care.